Alexander Napolin, attorney at large, goes live every weekday afternoon discussing a current event from the legal perspective and answering your questions in the chat. But remember, it's not legal advice. If you need legal advice, you contact a lawyer. You get that direct feedback from the lawyer. That's legal advice. With that said, let's jump into the current event for today, which is a reversal by the Biden administration that excludes many from student loan debt relief. If you have not heard, the Biden administration issued an executive order canceling student loan debt for all student loan borrowers who have loans. Up to $10,000 is a $10,000 debt cancellation for those who qualify. So if you make less than $125,000 a year, you get $10,000 off your federal student loans. If you're married, you make less than $250,000 a year, you get $10,000 off your student loans. And if you have current income-based repayment, you already have your paperwork with the federal government. That's going to happen automatically next month, apparently, because the federal government already knows how much you make. But if you don't have your loans in income-based repayment or some other program, then you're going to have to submit and ask the education department for that loan cancellation. But in a reversal, some of the student loan borrowers are not going to be included, up to 4 million of them. And that's because there are apparently 4 million borrowers that still have federal family education loans. These are FFEL loans that are issued and managed by private banks but guaranteed by the federal government. Okay, they were once the mainstay of the federal student loan program until the FFEL program ended in 2010. So before 2010 or 2010 and before, these the mainstay, the main way that people got loans was through this FFEL program, and these loans are held by private banks and they're guaranteed by the federal government. And what's the difference? Well, if you have a federal direct loan, the federal government is the one giving the money, is the one who the borrower owes the money to, and it's much easier to cancel that type of debt than to go to a private bank and say, hey, by the way, you don't get the interest or the principal back on these loans. We're just canceling them. So the education department walked back its offer on its website that offered to allow the FFEL loans to be consolidated with direct loans and then forgiven. Now, this affects up to 4 million student loan borrowers, but the Biden administration has said, no, it actually doesn't affect 4 million. It only affects 800,000. And that's because apparently only 800,000 people don't have federal direct loans as well. So of the 4 million borrowers, many of them, 3.2 million of them, it sounds like, also have federal direct loans. And under the cancellation, those federal direct loans will still receive the $10,000 cancellation. And therefore, they'll still have their FFEL loans, but they got the $10,000 of relief on the federal direct loans. Now, many people are challenging this whole thing, saying, hey, President Biden doesn't have the authority by executive order. Only Congress can modify student loans. Well, that's not entirely true, because there's something called the 2003 HEROES Act, and that gives the executive branch, the president, the education department, the authority to modify student loans in case of a national emergency. And President Trump used this authority to pause repayments on federal direct student loans during the pandemic, and so did Biden. And Biden is now making good on his campaign promise to use that 2003 HEROES Act to further modify the loans by canceling up to $10,000 per loan per borrower, we'll say. Now, there's apparently some way to get $20,000 if you have Perkins loans. It's mentioned in this article that I'm reading on NPR that Perkins loans and that both Perkins loans and federal family education loans are losing this debt cancellation. So I'm not 100% certain on this. If you have Perkins loans, I read in another article that it's up to $20,000 of loan cancellation on Perkins loans. So that's a question that's still out there. Maybe I'll do another little segment on that on Monday. But for now, people understand that if you have student loans and you have FFEL loans, that Biden has walked that back. and has said, hey, you're not going to be able to get that because these private banks have made a huge deal about having those loans canceled, not getting the interest, not getting the principal repaid on that $10,000. Well, it's probably all interest, because if you had FFEL loans from back before 2010, I mean, you got so much interest on those loans, you'll probably never pay them off. And that's a big problem with the student loan situation in the United States, is that the way that everything went down is just straddle the kids with loans, more loans, more loans, more loans. Of course, the colleges are more than happy to do that. That's how we pay professors. That's how we pay administration to teach the next generation. Anyway, that's it for today. That's my current event from the legal perspective. This is Alexander Napolin, Attorney at Large, goes live every weekday afternoon discussing a current event from the legal perspective and answering your questions in the chat. Now, it's not legal advice. If you need legal advice, you need to call a lawyer. If you're in Southern California, you can reach me at 866-NAPOLIN. You can learn more about my practice at www.napolinlaw.com.